Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Lawyer. So, would you know what to do if you're in an accident involving an Uber or Lyft or other rideshare vehicle? Well, today we're going to ask the lawyer just that for advice if you're ever in that situation. My guest is attorney Grant Lawson of the Metier law firm in Casper, Wyoming. Grant, thank you for making some time to be here with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with just the basic. Is it difficult to figure out who's responsible in an accident with a rideshare? Is it the driver? Is it the company? Is it somebody else? Is it all of the above? Where do we go there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Is it all the above? It's important to have somebody take a look at this from the start. And usually what you'll do is find out whether or not there's a traffic accident report, a TAR, so to speak, whether there was an investigation done. More than likely, almost certainly, that if there is an accident involving a rideshare company, the driver will report that to his company or superiors, and that company, whether it be a Uber or a Lyft or one of the other companies, they will conduct some type of an investigation. Now, that information isn't going to be readily available to someone who's involved in an accident. Likely, you'll have to start with your local law enforcement. But most importantly, I would suggest that you start with a lawyer who knows how to get this information, what's available readily, what you can attempt to get from the companies, and the next steps that must be taken in order to kind of push the process forward, so to speak.
Now, whose insurance company am I dealing with? If I'm injured, am I dealing with the driver's insurance? Is it Uber's insurance? Who do we talk to?
Well, that's a great question. And so you have to look at, well, who's at fault? Was it the Uber driver? Was it another driver? You're going to be looking at potentially three sources of insurance. There could be the Uber or the Lyft or any of the rideshare companies' insurance that may apply. You could be looking at the other driver if another vehicle is involved, their insurance. And then also you yourself as a passenger in a rideshare vehicle, you may have your own personal insurance that actually provides coverage for an accident that you're involved in, even though you're not in your own vehicle. So there are definitely different layers, different companies involved, different insurance providers involved. And it's important that you have somebody making sure they look at all of the different contracts, the insurance policies, the language, and the laws in that state to see what could apply to your situation.
Are there any required minimums that the drivers are supposed to carry as far as insurance minimums or that Uber and Lyft are supposed to have?
Well, there's state required minimums, which are unfortunately, as we find as lawyers, wholly insufficient and inadequate for people who are involved in accidents and those that are seriously injured. But in terms of the rideshare companies, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the bigger ones, have pretty serious levels of insurance. Most are starting around $1 million of liability coverage. That also applies to underinsured coverage, underinsurance coverage, or uninsurance coverage, which are two terms that most people out there aren't familiar with. And it essentially stands for or applies to a situation where another driver who's at fault doesn't have enough insurance coverage. Then a company like Uber or Lyft or one of the other ones that has a sufficient amount will have coverage that can provide the passenger who's hurt additional insurance money, even though another driver might be at fault and they don't have enough insurance coverage.
Now, in addition to accidents, that's one thing, but it seems like every other day or so in the news, we hear a story about whether there's a kidnapping or a sexual assault or that sort of thing perpetrated by an Uber or Lyft driver. What are my rights? What are what other options do I have if I'm a victim or in those situations?
Well, to start with, Uber is known to have $1 million insurance policy that provides for liability coverage in case you're in an accident. Whether or not an Uber or Lyft or one of these other companies has insurance coverage that covers their drivers for conduct outside of your traditional accident, it is completely fact specific. It is also state law specific. And so Uber itself, just using Uber as the example, they advertise to the public that they are doing background checks on their drivers. So they're representing to the public that they're they're putting drivers in vehicles with Uber stickers or flashings, the lights on the car that say Uber, that they are safe, they are trained, they are somebody that you can rely upon. And so they have a duty to look back into the background and history of a driver before hiring them to make sure that they are safe and can be trusted. And so in those situations, those very unfortunate situations involving assaults, whether it be sexual or a battery or something else along those lines, there may be a pattern of conduct that a rideshare company knew about or should have known about that may make them liable for putting somebody in that position and giving the public the impression that this is a safe driver to go with in a certain event.
A lot of times Ubers are used in situations where somebody's been drinking, or a lot of people have been drinking, maybe after a concert or a festival or something like that. If I'm in an Uber and there's a drunk driver that causes an accident with the rideshare that I'm in, is my only recourse against the driver of the vehicle the drunk driver?
Great question. And so this gets back to what I mentioned earlier about underinsurance coverage or uninsured coverage. And that is that typically Uber is, again, using Uber as an example, has $1 million of coverage for underinsurance. So let's say you're in an Uber, you're on your way back from a great concert, and unfortunately some other driver who's intoxicated runs into your vehicle and hurts you severely and doesn't have insurance or has a very low level of insurance. The insurance coverage that Uber has may provide up to $1 million that may help cover what you've been through, whether medical expenses or other expenses, non-economic damages as well, pain and suffering, things like that. And also, it's important to keep in mind that a ride share, somebody who's doing ride sharing may also have their own personal insurance that may provide protection and coverage as well. And then not to make things too complicated, but depending upon the state that you live in, you may have the ability to stack policies, which means you might have multiple insurance policies that all apply and can be combined to provide a combined amount that is available to help you. And again, that's state specific and fact specific on the situation.
You may not be able to answer this, but it just occurred to me, does my own personal insurance that I carry for when I'm in my vehicle, does it have any coverage when I'm in another vehicle like a ride share?
Well, that's a great question. It could. The answer is it could. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you have somebody looking at that policy, looking at the state laws to find out whether or not that's something that's covered by your own personal insurance. We pay for our own personal insurance. And a lot of times that they provide underinsured coverage or underinsured coverage or uninsured coverage. Those are two different things. Somebody who's underinsured or somebody who doesn't have any insurance at all.
Right.
And in order to answer that question, we got to know what the policy says. We got to know what the state law is, because it's all specific to the 50 different states and the policies that each person buys with each different type of insurance company. So again, it's why we strongly recommend that you go see a lawyer who can help look through this all these different questions and help find out whether or not there's something there to help you.
And I would assume it's the same situation, but we get advised all the time, if you're in an accident and you think you may need to get an attorney involved, to do it as soon as possible. I would assume these sort of situations would be similar advice?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that you contact somebody as soon as possible, because attorneys will typically get out what's called a notice letter or a spoliation letter, a letter that notifies other people involved, other companies, rideshare companies, insurance companies, that there has been an accident, that there is representation, and there will be an investigation, so that all the evidence is preserved, nothing is lost or something worse, and that your rights are being protected. That's why it's important, absolutely, from the start, to get an attorney involved.
So what's your advice for somebody that may use rideshare a lot, maybe in a bigger city, or maybe when they're traveling, or maybe young people who may not have a license yet or don't want to drink and drive? Do you have some advice in general for people that use it quite often?
Yeah, especially with the bigger providers, you're able to look at the specific driver that you're requesting or you're summoning, for lack of a better way of saying, and they have a lot of feedback. Customers will provide feedback, ratings of a star system 1 through 5, and provide notation. So it's good to know, what's the general feedback you're getting, and whether that's being provided. Also, being safe and being in the right locations when you're using your app and summoning a driver, and obviously not being intoxicated helps. Also, having your phone having sufficient charge so that in the event of an emergency, you have your phone available to you. But there's just safe practices.
Right.
Maybe also notifying somebody that you're taking a ride share before you do it, so that you have friends or family who will know that you're doing such a thing, and just it kind of provides a little bit of a backstop for you in case something happens.
Great advice, Grant. I thank you so much. I appreciate all the helpful information today.
Yeah, thank you. Great being with you. I appreciate it, and hope everybody out there stay safe in your ride sharing events.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Grant Lawson of the Metier law firm in Casper, Wyoming. If you want the best information about personal injury law, or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to visit our website, askthelawyer.com, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the button at the bottom of the screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com.